Hi, it's Suzanne Barron, founder of Christ, the True Light. I want to read Exodus 25. I want to talk about the creation of the ark and the creation of the tabernacle and what they subliminally and symbolically mean to us today. Um, God gave Moses a very descriptive blueprint of how to create all the items that were inside the tabernacle. Everything, as far as like the curtains and the utensils and the lampstand and how the table was supposed to be built for the showbread, everything. The veil with the room with the most holy place, everything. He gave a very descriptive blueprint. And it's kind of a hard read because there's so many little bitty things, and each little thing has a symbolic meaning. And we're supposed to understand something about this. It's hard to say. The Christians, they see this as God's covenant, and what God was trying to do to give them a place of worship and setting them apart. And there's a lot to it that the Christians will talk about, and a lot of that's true. But there's a deeper spiritual meaning in it that I want to show the world, and what they actually mean for us now. God had to have them build things that were human like for us to understand a spiritual message. He built the tabernacle to get us to understand that God's spirit dwells inside the tabernacle. The tabernacle was later built into a brick mortar building, and they called it the temple in Jesus' time. But in Exodus, it was a tent. It was rectangular in shape. I'll put the pictures. And it had a room in the back of the building. The back of the tent, there was a room, and it was called the most holy place. There was the Holy of Holies and then the most holy place. Um, and inside that holy place is where the ark was supposed to sit, the most holy. The back of that room is where the most holy place was supposed to be. And there was a curtain in between the most holy place and the Holy of Holies, and it's called the veil. Now, there's a lot to it. I don't have an eloquent tongue. It's hard for me to say these things. He also gave instructions of how the priest was supposed to wear, like the breastpiece and the ephod and the helmet, and the hood. See, Wycliffe tells us that there was a hood for his head, and newer texts will say like an opening for his head, like an opening, like it looks like a t-shirt. But Wycliffe gives us the understanding of a hood. A hood goes over, like, you wear a sweater, it has a hood with a hole for the head. And that's Exodus 28, verse 32. And thou shalt make the coat of the cloth or cloak on the shoulders or cape of all jacket, and in whose middle above shall be an hood. That is a hole for the head, a hood. Now, the newer text says a hole for the head, like this. It gives you this impression. But Wycliffe, which is our first English translation, says a hood. It covers your head. Now, there's so much symbolism with that, with like in Ephesians, where he says the salvation, a helmet for salvation. The helmet goes on your head. Salvation is found right here. It's found here. Consciousness in your mind. Um, all throughout the Bible is talking about having a sound mind, a sober mind. Make your thoughts, take them captive. Have the mind of God, a mind, consciousness in your mind. Salvation is here. The door is found right here in your mind. But I'm just gonna read chapter 25. I just got my YouTube channel back up. I did they took it down. I did the appeal and they let it back up. So here we go again. It says, and the Lord spoke to Moses and said, speak thou to the sons of Israel, that they take to or bring me the first fruits of each man that offereth willfully, ye shall take or receive those things. Forsooth, these things it be, which you shall take, gold and silver and brass, and jacketh and purple and red silk twice dyed and bist, that is, white silk and hairs of goats, and skins of wethers or rams made red, and skins of jacketh or blue skins, and wood of shittim or acacia wood. So I need to let you know that this version is taking the Wycliffe and then it's giving us the modern understanding. So it says the wood of shittim, which is acacia wood. So you'll hear me say or a lot. It says in verse 6, and oil too, or for the lights, to be ordained, sweet smelling spicery or ointment and incense of good odor. Now the lights, there was a lampstand in the tabernacle. It talks about that, but also God's spirit inside the most holy place was the big bright light that sat in between the two cherubs. There's a glowing, glorious light inside of that room. We talk about in Revelation, we talk about the candlestick, the lamp. It says that the city does not need the sun or moon to give its light, for the Lamb is its lamp. This light, Revelation 18 says, the light of the lamp will not shine in you no more. By your merchants or the world's most important people. By your magic spells, which that word is pharmakia, so witchcraft, sorcery, pharmakia, pharmaceuticals. By your magic spells, all nations were led astray. The lamp, there was a very light that lighteth each man that comes into the world. This light is Christ. This light is God. This lamp is in you. Be careful that the light in you is not dark. That's what Jesus said. This is Illuminati. The Illuminati are not human. They are spirits, good and evil. Mostly good because Satan is not a light, really. He's darkness. Be careful the light in you is not dark. Illuminati means to be illuminated by a light that enlightens your mind. The people in the past believed they were in communication with a great light. They spoke to this light. They were prophets. Verse 6, and to oil for the lights to be ordained, sweet smelling spicery, and to ointment and incense of good odor, onyx stones and gems to adorn the ephod, that is a chasuble, and the rational, that is an ouch, hanging on the priest's breast, and which is written doom and truth. I wrote this down, don't have my phone with me, which is written doom and truth. So Wycliffe tells us that there's an engraving. Oh, if I wrote it down, I don't think I did. There is an engraving taking place to this breastpiece, doom and truth, on top of the breastpiece. You got to think about truth being in your heart, on your breastpiece. Doom, the dooms, like you can be doomed, like good and bad, on his breastpiece, where your heart is. But the newer text does not say that. It doesn't tell us doom and truth. It doesn't. This is the 1382 translation. It says, or was carried the Urim, or whatever, I can't pronounce those words. And they shall make a sanctuary to me, and I shall dwell in the midst of them. So he's letting it know that I am God, and I'm going to dwell within this tabernacle. I'm going to dwell with you. And he's staging, he's leading us up to something. He was already with them because he lives in all men that are born and created, animals too. He is the breath of life. He's inside of us all. But he needed us to understand this. So he creates the ark, the tabernacle, for us to see a physical thing so that we can understand a spiritual message. That is what this is for. This is what is important. By all the likeness of the tabernacle, I will show to thee that blueprint I was telling you about, and all the vessels and the adorning thereof. And thus ye shall make it, join together an ark, or a coffer, or a box, of the wood of shittim, whose length shall have 2 cubits and a half, the breadth shall have 1.5 cubits, the height in like manner 1.5 cubits. So it's going to have this box. All right. And thou shalt overgild it with the cleanest or purest gold. So it's going to be like royalty gold, right? You think about that. Within and without. And thou shalt make a golden crown above the compass and put a gold band around it. So royalty. Now, God's spirit supposedly dwelled on top of this box in between the two cherubs. And in Samuel, we see them calling the box God. This box, later on, after Moses and the rod performed the miracles, he's creating this box. And then later on, we see this box perform miracles, just as the rod did. Now, the rod was inside of this box. Moses was told to put that rod inside the box. And then the box became the power and performed signs, wonders, and miracles, just like Jesus did. And they called the box God, just like we call Jesus God. And in 1 Samuel, the box was captured. God sent a plague to set that box free. So the box in 1 Samuel was symbolic. God, this box is God. Oh no, a God has come into the camp. Who will save us from the hands of these mighty gods? This box. And it was captured. So God was captured in 1 Samuel. God was literally captured in 1 Samuel. This is a vulnerable God. Revelation says the lamb slain from the creation of the world. This is a vulnerable God. And thou shalt make 4 golden rings, which thou shalt set by the 4 corners of the ark. So you're going to have this box. I'm going to put pictures. It's going to have 4 golden rings. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this is where the rods are going to go into. For the 2 rings will be on one side and 2 on the other. So rings and rings. And thou shalt make the bars out of shittim wood. So bars are going to go through. And thou shalt cover them with gold. And thou shalt bring them in by through the rings, that they be in or on the sides of the ark, that it be borne in them. So it's part of them. It's born into them. And which the bars shall evermore be in the rings. So they'll always be inside of it. Neither shall they come out at any time or be drawn. Shall they at any time be drawn out of them? And thou shalt put, this is how they carried it, because the bars hung out. So it had 4, like you'd think about 2 men on the front holding it and 2 men in the back holding it. That's how they carried the ark, with these bars. And thou shalt make a propitiatory out of the cleanest of pure gold, that is a table covering the ark, or a place of, or for purchasing mercy. The length thereof shall hold 2.5 cubits, and the breadth shall hold 1.5 cubits. And thou shalt make on every either side of God's answering place, or for each end of the propitiatory of the mercy seat, 2 cherubims of gold. These are angels, golden angels. And in between the 2 golden angels was where that big glorious light was, where the Spirit symbolically dwelled. All right. And it filled the most holy place. This light filled it, this glorious light, this cloud, just filled this most holy place. God's presence was inside of that room. Okay. Now these 2 cherubims, they would fit with with Ezekiel's vision when he saw cherubims, but they had 4 faces. He calls them seraphims. And I've done a video on this where I say the seraphims and the cherubims are the same thing, because 2 different men gave them 2 different names, but they also had 2 different visions. And visions are what they are. They're visions. They're not black and white. You have visions, you see things that don't always make sense, but they are meant to be the same. So these cherubims are members to the kingdom. Like this ark is God's throne. He's sitting inside of this holy place behind a curtain, which is the veil. And we see a veil on Moses' face when he comes down Mount Sinai, where the glorious light was behind the veil. I talk about behind the veil a lot. I got blogs on this. The light is behind the veil. Moses' face shone like a light. That light was behind the veil. Paul talks about a veil with unveiled faces, right? He talks about unveiled faces. He understands you can see God spiritually, but you can't really physically see him. You can see him behind the veil. Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, his face shone like the sun, the veil was lifted, and we got to peer inside of this room. This room was inside of Jesus's flesh. This is the message. Jesus said, I will rebuild this temple in 3 days. This room with the ark, this holy place, is inside your human flesh. It's inside of you. Is it a light that's bright, or is it a light of darkness? This is key. So I don't preach a message on telling people how to live their lives, but you need to understand this symbolism so that you can understand how important it is to change your life and live for God. Because if the light is not a light and it is dark, you will not see heaven. You have not fully entered this room. You will not go to this room if you don't have the bright, glorious light of Christ, of God. If the light has turned dark, then you're doomed. And you don't have the light of truth. So your afterlife, where will it be? It's important. Thou shalt make an ever either side of God's answering place, or for each end of the propitiatory or the mercy seat, 2 cherubim of gold beating out with a hammer. So this is all blueprint stuff. That's why it's hard to read. 1 cherub, but he wanted to make sure that it was perfect so that we can understand. It needed to be perfect. Make sure you do it this way because it's going to mean something. 1 cherub shall be on one side or at the end of God's answering place. Now, inside of Jesus' tomb, when Mary looks in after he died, what did she find? Did she find Jesus? No. What did she find? She found 2 angels, 2 human formed angels, sitting at one at the head and one at the foot. This showed us something, that Jesus entered into that room. Jesus' body was on top of that table, that mercy seat. These things happened. This building of this ark happened. And many years later, the ark disappears. Nobody knows where it's at. It's gone. And then all of a sudden, Jesus dies. And we have an understanding of something inside of his tomb, where his table was, where the body laid. It's no longer there. 2 angels at the head and at the foot. This is symbolic. It's subliminal. It's beautiful. This shows us that Jesus made it into that room when he died. He entered into the holy place. He entered into it. A Christian could say this a heck of a lot better than I can, but that's where he went. Okay, verse 20. And hold they their wings, and covered they God's answering place, and behold, they themselves together, while their faces be turned into the propitiatory, so they're facing forward, with which the ark of the Lord shall be covered, and which ark thou shalt put the witnessing. That is the tablets of the law that I shall give to thee. So he's going to give them the 10 commandments. I want you to put the 10 commandments inside that ark. Now, this 10 commandments says, thou shalt not murder. And later on, we see God permitting certain murders. But he said, do not murder. And I preach a whole message on how Deuteronomy 13 says to murder that prophet. Well, Jesus was that prophet. So they followed their law. They obeyed what God said, and they murdered the prophet that came along performing signs and wonders. That was Jesus. That's Deuteronomy 13. And they followed their law. They murdered him. But God said, do not murder. And then there's other verses that says, you who murdered the prophets. Jesus was a prophet, and he was murdered. And you who murdered the prophets is talking about how, like, you did bad. You were doing something wrong. You should have not murdered those prophets. You're evil. You who murdered the prophets. So why would God give the instructions to murder prophets? He didn't. He said, do not murder. And it was so important that he said, put it inside the ark. And we were supposed to follow that. So what am I saying? Who said murder? That would be a different God. That would be somebody else. Doom. Satan, the viper. You're trying to murder me, you vipers. A different God. Okay, it also says, thou shalt put the witnessing. Wycliffe says tables of witnessing. Okay, it doesn't say tablet, 10 Commandments. It doesn't say the covenant law. It says tablets of witnessing. So witnessing, there's verses that says we are surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses, right? The witnesses, witnessing, spirits, these things link together, and there's got to be a better way to say this. But it also said that his face shone with radiant or wonderful shining beams, Moses, wonderful shining beams because of his fellowship of God's word. God's word is what gave him the 10 Commandments, the witnessing, these witnesses, a witness, surrounded by such a great cloud of witnessing. Okay, so those are people, witnesses, witnessing. They're people, they're spirits that are witnessing to you within that cloud. There's a cloud that filled the most holy place. All right. His face shone. Moses coming down the mountain. It says, Wycliffe version says, it doesn't say radiant or shining. It says his face was shining with wonderful shining beams because of his fellowship of God's word. Wonderful shining beams. So like beams of light, like a sunlight beaming out of his face. That is what happened to Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. His face shone like the sun. Both of those men transfigured. Both of them. Jesus, the veil was lifted. They saw inside the kingdom where the witnesses were, Moses and Elijah, in Jesus' story in the Mount of Transfiguration. Moses put a veil over his face to separate the bright light from this realm so that the Israelites couldn't see it. That light, where did it come from? It came from inside of Moses. Where is the light in the tabernacle? In that most holy place, in that room, behind the veil. When you read anything about the veil, Paul talks about it. The veil. So God is inside of you. Okay, verse 23. And thou shalt make a board or a table of the wood of shittim, or acacia wood, having 2 cubits of length, and 1 cubit in broadness, and 1 cubit and a half in height. And thou shalt overgild the board or table with most pure gold. And thou shalt make to it a golden brink about, or put a gold band all around it. And thou shalt make to that brink a crown raised betwixt 4 fingers high. And thou shalt make on that another little golden crown. And thou shalt make ready 4 golden rings, and thou shalt put them in the 4 corners of the same board. So he's making the table now. This is not inside of the holy place. This is in front of the veil. This is in the holy place. There's the holy place, and then you go into the most holy place. And I'll put pictures on the blog. A crown shall be the golden rings, and the bars be put through them, and so the table may be borne. Thou shalt make the bars of the wood of shittim, and thou shalt compass them with gold to bear the board. And thou shalt make ready vessels of, or for the vinegar, and vials, a basin, and censers, the purest cups of pure sculpture. Everything's going to be made out of gold, royalty, in which flowing sacrifices shall be offered. And thou shalt set on the board the loaves of propitiatory, or loaves of setting forth, which is the showbread, to be in my sight or before me evermore. And thou shalt make a candlestick beaten out of a hammer of cleanest gold, and thou shalt make the shaft thereof, and the rods, and the cups, and the little roundels, and lilies coming forth thereof. 6 rods shall go out of one side of it, 3 out of the other, and 3 out of the other. So it's got 7 candles, really, right? And then it's got 3 coming out on each side, and I will put the images. Now, this light is inside the holy place, is what I said. But it's not necessarily the same light that's inside of the most holy place. Okay? As far as understanding in a symbolic, subliminal message, it's like said a Christian could say it better. Supposed to stay lit all the time. It's got 7 candles. It's just hard to say. Still important. Forsooth, in that candlestick shall be 4 cups in the manner of a nut, and roundels and lilies by each cup, and the little rounders or balls shall be the 2 rods by 3 places, the which rods altogether be made 6, coming forth of the one shaft. And therefore the little roundels and the rods thereof shall all be beaten out with a hammer of cleanest gold. And thou shalt make 7 lanterns. So he's telling him how to build the candlesticks, but now he's making the lanterns. And the candlestick, you think about, you've got this little thing that you carry around. There's a Jewish name for it. But now you got to make the candles. And thou shalt make 7 lanterns, and thou shalt set them in the candlestick. So if that makes sense. So you're putting the wax together. That's the lantern. And the candlestick is made out of gold. So now you're going to set this wax lantern inside the candlestick. That's what we would do today. That they shine even against each other. So it's like the people. And they're shining against each other. I don't have a smooth tongue. Right? I understand this. We're supposed to be like-minded, be in fellowship with other people who believe in God, who are like us. We're all to have this light in us. And we're shining together. All right, but then the God inside of the Holy of Holies, the most holy room, that's what's really important, because where does the light even give us light? How can we even have a light at all for us to shine against each other? Because there's God in us, and He is that light. That's the best way I can say it. Okay. Also, tongs to snuff out the candles, and the vessels where these snuffs that be snuffed out, be quenched, shall be made of cleanest gold. So it can be snuffed out. All the weight of the candlestick or the lampstand with all of his or its vessels shall have or weigh a talent of purest gold. Now pay attention to that. All the weight of the candlestick with all of his vessels. The candlestick with all of his vessels. It doesn't say with all of its vessels. It says with his vessels. I'm looking at it right now. All the weight of the candlestick or the lampstand with all of HIS, his. And the newer text says its, ITS. The Wycliffe First English Translation says his vessels shall have or weigh a talent of cleanest gold. Behold thou, and make all these by the exemplar, which is or was showed to thee in or on the hill. So make sure you do this the way that you saw it, the way I told you to do. It's very important that you do this by the blueprint I have given you. All right. Thank you.